Incentive programs. So we've already talked about EMR and EHR systems and how beneficial they can be in a doctor's office or a hospital or a nursing home or things like that. But we've also talked about the cost of these things and how do you pick what program and how do you actually get it into your office. And sometimes these things are so expensive that doctor's offices, especially small private doctor's offices, don't even want to try and bother to get involved in this because it's so expensive. So basically what the government has done is they've created two different kinds of programs to entice, or if you want to use the word bribe, I guess, doctors to begin using EMR systems in different ways. So if the word incentive messes you up a little bit, change that to bribe, because that's kind of what it is. So basically the government has found ways to give doctors' offices money if they do X, Y, and Z while they're using EMR and EHR systems. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So there's two different kinds of programs that we're going to talk about, one of which is just local, and it's just in PA, and you might not see it very much in your clinical lives. And then the other one is it's national, and it's one that you are going to be dealing with once you hit your clinical sites and then once you hit your actual jobs. So let's just do some basics. Oh, and there's a typo already. That first bullet point is supposed to say EMR, EHR, not her. Thank you very much, autocorrect. But this slide basically just recaps the stuff that I just said. So in a way, as a way to have these doctors' offices actually start using EMR and EHR instead of paper charting, the government found two different ways to kind of bribe these offices, these hospitals, to be able to use them. So they offer incentives or bribes, and in this case, all of the incentives are money for meeting particular standards, and we're going to get into them. So like I said, there's two different programs. The first one we're going to talk about is the CCILC program. So, CCILC stands for the Chronic Care Initiative Learning Collaborative. This is actually the government incentive program that I spearheaded for my physicians. So I was the project leader on this, and it was my job to use our EMR system, EHR system, to be able to pull information. So basically the way that this started, and I'm going to get a little ahead of myself in the story. So the story is on the second slide here. So I'm going to be talking about this first slide, the second slide, and the third slide all at the same time, just so that you're not messed up on what I'm talking about. So basically what had happened was, back in 2005, they did a study on why people land their butts in the hospital the most, basically. And in Pennsylvania, it was found that more and more people were going into the hospital more and more often for diabetes and for asthma. So down in the southeast, most people were going into the hospital for asthma, and it wasn't being treated enough to keep them out of the hospital. And then in the northeast, which is us, diabetes was the big problem. So patients weren't being treated well enough in the doctor's offices for these chronic diseases that they kept landing their butts in the hospital. And a chronic disease means that it's not going away. So asthma never goes away and diabetes never goes away. So if you look at that bottom bullet point on this particular slide, we were 3 and 4 times the national average just in Pennsylvania alone. So Governor Rendell, who was in office at that point, decided that something needed to be done. So this study came out in 2005, and the idea behind this initiative program came out about 2 years later in 2007. So it actually started in 2008. So what Governor Rendell decided to do was, he was like, hey, let's get patients to be treated in their offices, in the doctor's offices, better, so this way they don't have to end up in the hospital. So if doctors can treat patients better in their offices, they won't go to the hospital. That was the point behind CCILC, and that was what started it. Let's treat them better in the office, so this way they don't end up in the hospital. Hopefully I don't have to repeat as much, because you might be pausing and rewinding me. But that was what spawned this. Treat them better in the doctor's office, they won't have to go to the hospital. If I treat them better in the doctor's office and they don't have to go to the hospital, now the insurance companies aren't paying out as much money, because a doctor's office visit costs a whole lot less than a hospitalization does. So Governor Rendell got the insurance companies on board and basically said, hey, wait a minute, okay, so if we can get doctors to treat these patients better in the offices, it'll save you money because they won't be in the hospital. So, dear Mr. Insurance Company, will you take that money that you've saved and give it to the doctor's office as the incentive? So that's where the incentive comes from. If the doctor treats the patient better in the office and they don't end up in the hospital, the insurance company gives them money. That's how it works. So in 2008, this started. And it started in the southeast portion of the state first. So in May 2008, and I am right here on this second bullet point, if you can see where my arrow is, they started on asthma first. So the team got together and they made some standards. So the goal would be that 90% of asthmatic patients would have an asthma care plan that showed what they do if they have this kind of breathing issue and this kind of breathing issue. It wasn't until November 2009 that the Northeast portion of the state kicked in, and the Northeast focused on diabetes only. So up here in the Northeast, we also had different standards. So some of them were, we needed 80% of our patients who were diabetic to have a blood pressure below 130 over 80. Or over 90. We needed to have 90% of their A1C levels underneath 9. Things like that. So they gave us these ideal goals or benchmarks. Like, hey, we hope that if you have X amount of your diabetic patients meet this goal, and this goal, then they shouldn't go into the hospital. So for diabetes, we focused on their weight, we focused on if they smoked. If they did smoke, we gave them what was called smoking cessation, which is counseling to stop smoking, things like that. So CCILC is completely voluntary. You don't qualify for it. You just say, hey, sure, sign me up. You sign a contract, and that's that. And it lasts for 6 years. And the thing is, that during those 6 years, someone, in this case it was me, every single month has to use the EMR system to pull data. So every month I would have to run reports through our system to find out how many of our diabetics had a foot exam, how many had a blood pressure below 130 over 90, how many had a blood pressure below 120 over 80, and things like that. Then I would take that data and I would interpret it and I would turn it into like a paragraph report and I would send it in. So if you mess up, so let's say we fall below our standards, we're not making progress, things aren't going well. CCILC puts us on kind of a probation. That's our penalty. They look at us and they go, oh, well, you're not doing so good, so here's what you should try next month. Good luck with that. We'll check back in with you. It'll be all right. They don't take any money away. They don't break our contract. They just kind of give us ways to improve. Now, this slide you can read on your own. This is nothing to freak out or kind of memorize. The stuff on this slide is far more important. But After we were working with diabetes for about a year, then the program expanded for us in the Northeast and for people in the Southeast, where we also expanded to the other conditions. And it happened gradually. So the first year we just got diabetes under our belts, and then we spread to asthma. And the people down in the Southeast who started with asthma then spread to diabetes. By the time the program was under full swing, these were all of the things that we were looking at. And each one of these things, asthma, diabetes, hypertension, ischemic vascular disease, and all those preventative measures, every single one of those came with their own set of measurements and standards. So I was running reports out the wazoo. Then I was making paragraph interpretations for it, and I was telling the clinicians how to better document and things that we can do to improve our rates. And believe it or not, the program actually worked. We had far fewer patients who were in the hospital. Patients were saying that they were more satisfied with their in-office visits. We kept better track of our patients, and it was completely impossible to do this without our EMR system. So just in 2012 was the last year that I participated in this before I left. Anyone, you're listening to this right now, take a guess how much money I made that physician just in 2012 alone. And this was just extra money. He still got paid for all the regular office visits and consults and all the other stuff he normally did. So guess your number. Whatever your number is, probably go higher. Because in 2012, just for this initiative alone, I made him $112,000. Yeah, of extra bonus money. And after his wife spent it on a new basement and a new pool and things like that, I got a pretty crappy bonus and decided to leave. But there was a lot of money to be made in this. So, the main thing you need to remember, I'm going to back up a couple slides. These are the main things that you need to remember about CCILC. In the Southeast, it started with asthma in 2008. In the Northeast, it started with diabetes in 2009. The process lasts 6 years, and the whole point behind it was if we treat them better in the doctor's office, then they won't end up in the hospital. That's kind of the wrap-up of CCILC. So, these are some of the insurance companies that were involved in paying these incentives. So now we're going to move on to the other one, which is meaningful use. And this is the one that's going to mean a whole lot more to you guys. So, the point behind starting CCILC was to keep people out of the hospital. Treat them better in the office, and it keeps them out of the hospital. The point behind starting meaningful use is completely different. The motivation for starting meaningful use was to get people to stop using paper charts and start using an EMR, EHR system somehow. That's it. So, this is called meaningful use because they want computers used in a quote-unquote meaningful way. So right now, this is the most popular incentive program, and this one is nationwide. So no matter what state you might work in, you're going to run into this. But it's really going to affect how you document things. So the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services are the people who created this and the people who pay out for it. So Medicare is the insurance that the old people get, and Medicaid is the insurance like medical assistance or Unison. Medicaid is usually the one that's paid for by the government when people can't afford it themselves. So they're the two agencies. So meaningful use commonly is called MU. Please notice I said M and nothing offensive. So this started in 2011. So it's really recent. It's not very old, and it's not over yet. So even even though meaningful use is voluntary right now, just like CCILC is, but it will become mandatory in the future. At which point and what year it will become mandatory, we don't know yet. But the longer that you wait to join meaningful use, the less money you stand to make. So, people who joined in 2011, which my office did, they are going to make more money over the 5-year span of this program, as opposed to people who join later. So that's another part of the incentive. Join earlier, make more money. Wait too long, make less money. So some people who decide to wait and wait and wait and wait and never become part of this might not get any incentives for doing this. So, unlike CCILC, doctors actually have to qualify to participate in meaningful use. And to qualify, you need to have a certain percentage of your patients who either have Medicare insurance or have Medicaid insurance. Sometimes people end up disqualified, like pediatricians. Not a lot of patients, not a very high percentage of patients at a pediatrician's office have Medicare or have medical assistant and things like that. So they just get disqualified but not penalized because of it. So, no matter when you join the program, this lasts for 5 years. The program is technically over in 2021, so the last year that you can join meaningful use would be 2016, because then you have your 5-year reporting cycle. Okay, so here's kind of a breakdown of how the money works. So here's 2011, and if I joined, or my doctor's office did, they joined in 2011 and they got $18,000 just for joining in 2011. So each year they get a certain amount of money. Notice that the money amount goes down each year, but it's essentially free money because they don't have to do anything different or extra. They just have to change how they document, and they have to use an EMR or EHR system. So by the time the program is over for the people who started in 2011, they can stand to make $44,000 just for nothing, basically. So notice if you wait to join until 2014, you're only going to make $27,000, which is a considerable difference. So there are 3 stages to meaningful use over the 5 years. Within each stage, there are standards that have to be met. So standards are things that you have to do. There are 15 standards in each stage, which means that there are 45 standards total. That's the important part here. I'm going to show you a couple slides that actually give you the breakdown of what the stages are. Don't panic about them. Don't memorize the standards. Just know that there's 15 standards in each stage. So, in the first stage, the office does have to report information, just like I was telling you about with CCILC. But the nice thing about stage 1 is that stage 1 is like the baby steps to meaningful use. So stage 1 is where the doctor's offices are getting the computers, where they're getting trained, where they're learning how to use them. They're just learning how to put demographics in there, like address, phone number, things like that. So because they're just getting off the ground, the doctor's office only has to report in data for 3 consecutive months, and they get to pick what 3 months they want. So let's say they run the data for January, February, and March, and they don't meet the goals. Well, then they don't turn in the data. But let's say June, July, and August, they kicked butt. So they like that data, those are the 3 months that they turn in. Now, once you advance on to stages 2 and stages 3, you have to report data every single month of every year. I know that that's a lot. Okay, so here's an example of the stages. Again, don't get tripped up over here on what the criteria summary is. Basically, each one builds on each other. So it's kind of like going to school. So in the first quarter, we teach you this and we teach you some basics and things like that. And then when you get to the second quarter, you already know how to do this stuff, so we add more to it and we build on top of it until you could do all of this stuff. That's kind of the same exact point, except you're utilizing an EMR or an EHR system. So here's another way to look at the same thing. Stage 1 rolled out in 2011. We don't quite know the stages yet for Stage 3 because they can still be changed and manipulated. Stage 2 just rolled out this year, so it's relatively new. And again, you don't need to know when the stages rolled out. You just need to know there are 3 stages and there are 15 standards under each stage. That's it. And here's what I've been saying. So this first bullet point, each stage includes 15 different standards, so there are 45 total. Now, remember with CCILC, I said if you made a mistake, they kind of gave you some advice, they put you on probation and all was fine? Well, with meaningful use, if you mess up, they penalize you and they take money away. But the problem is, they don't penalize you and take money away until like year 4 or year 5 of the whole thing. So think of it this way. Imagine it's February, it's March, and you get your tax return check for a beautiful $3,000. So it's February, you just got $3,000. Think of the things that you're going to do with that. Pay some bills, pay off a credit card, take a vacation, buy a pair of shoes, go for a massage, whatever. But how long would that $3,000 last? How long would it take you to spend it? Yes, you should be answering me right now, even though I can't hear you. Okay, so you got that money in February. Now, in November, the IRS comes back to you and says, oopsie, you weren't supposed to get $3,000, so we're going to need that money back now. Yeah, thanks. Can you come up with $3,000 to give it to them? Hell no. So that's the problem that these doctor's offices are going through. They're getting incentive money every single year, but then when they do something wrong, they got to pay it back and they might not have the money anymore. Okay, so here's another close-up of the first stage of this. And again, the first stage is get the computer, figure out how to use it, and create a clinical information system like we talked about with the EMR PowerPoint. So here's your timeline, and this is the thing that's interesting. So, oops, sorry. Come on, go away, toolbar. So here's the year where most people started, in 2011. Here's the last year of the program in 2015 if you joined here. So here's year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's where the penalties begin. So this is where you... Oh, crap. Please hold. Technical difficulty. Okay. So this is where you got your tax refund check in February, and here's November where they're asking for the money back, basically, is what we're talking about. So that's a big problem for some doctor's offices if they make mistakes. So there's really no room for error with this one. CCILC, you had a little bit more wiggle room for error. Meaningful use, you don't. Okay, so here's just another way to look at the same timeline. Notice there's a huge gap between 2016 and 2021 because as this program has progressed since 2011, the government's been tweaking and changing dates and things like that. So there's really kind of no educated guess as what's going to happen between this 5-year pattern. So now the cool thing is that a lot of EMR systems have been creating different things within the program to help people document meaningful use stuff. So this is actually, these gas gauges, this is actually a picture from the EMR system, and they created what's called a meaningful use dashboard. So you can actually run your report and check your standards under each phase, and this gas gauge will tell you whether you're doing well or not. So if you're in the green, then you've met the goal. Yellow, not so good. Red, we got a problem. So the EMR systems have actually become a little bit more user-friendly just for this particular government initiative. That's how widespread this is. So here are just some examples of meaningful use penalties. You remember we talked about e-prescribing. E-prescribing is a big component of meaningful use. And if you aren't e-prescribing enough, then you lose a percentage of your incentive money. So 1% doesn't sound like very much, but for 1% of $44,000 that you suddenly have to come up with all on your own, all by yourself, that you weren't expecting, that kind of sucks. So 1% of $44,000 is $440. Think about how much it would take you to come up with $440 off the spot. And the penalties increase if you're not utilizing certain things by certain dates. The other penalty to this, so remember we said that this is voluntary, but it will become mandatory. Right now, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, right now they're projecting that if you are still using paper charts and you are not using EMR or EHR in a meaningful way by 2015, you're not going to get as much insurance reimbursement. So, for example, let's say the doctor's office makes $20,000 a year just because of the patients they see who have Medicare, okay? If the doctor's office that makes $20,000 a year just from Medicare isn't using an EMR in a meaningful way, and they're going to get penalized 5% of reimbursement, that means they're going to lose $1,000 of reimbursement. So they're going to start losing profits. That has nothing to do with the incentive money. That's just pure profit that they're going to be losing. So basically, you're going to lose penalty. You're going to lose money. Okay, so that's the end of the PowerPoint. But hang on a second. I know that this is a lot of information, so I've made you a chart that might help you out a little bit, and I actually want to walk you through it. And this is something that you either have gotten or will get from me. So, there's a lot of stuff that we talked about today. But I made you this chart to kind of help compare both of these things. So, when it comes to CCILC, the main motive behind starting it was if we treat patients better in the doctor's office, it'll keep them out of the hospital. But for meaningful use, everybody has to stop using paper charts, basically. That was the motive. Meaningful use started in 2011, but for CCILC, it had 2 different start dates in different parts of the state. And meaningful use is across the United States, whereas CCILC is just in PA. Now, it can be in other states, but it's probably called something different. So CCILC doesn't have a projected end date as of right now, but meaningful use does. Governor Rendell started CCILC, and the insurance companies are the ones who pay stuff. And for meaningful use, it's the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which is CMS. You can, if you choose to, oh my god, this stupid thing. You can choose to just remember the CMS, or you can choose to remember what it stands for. Either one is fine. So for CCILC, it's totally voluntary, and you just sign a contract. But for meaningful use, the longer you wait, the less money you stand to earn, and it will become mandatory. There's just no set date for that yet. And again, here's another reason why it started. For CCILC, the insurance companies, and many different insurance companies pay the incentives, but for meaningful use. It's just Medicare and Medicaid services that pay it. CCILC, there's no penalties if you mess up. Meaningful use, there are a lot of penalties. CCILC lasts for 6 years when you join, and meaningful use lasts for 5. So this chart kind of takes everything that was just in that PowerPoint and puts it in a comparative way for you. So I hope that this helps you study just a little bit more. If you have any questions about any of this, please make sure that you ask. Meaningful use will be the thing that you will run into more so than CCILC, because meaningful use is more widespread and more people are involved with meaningful use than are with CCILC. So make sure that if you have any questions that you ask me, that you email me, that you let me know. Make sure you play this more than once. Hopefully you still took notes while I was talking. And I will see you soon.